Alright, so this video here, learning to love Final Fantasy XIV. I don't know what it's really about, but it seemed interesting. Check it out. Should be enough. Well, this should be long enough for me to finish a burger. However, let me first this cup me. I guess. Get that. This filter's on it. Okay, so wait, this is nothing. Hold on, I need to fix this. We, 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 we. Okay, there we go. I think I got it now. Yeah, I think. Okay, I think we got it. Okay, I think we got it now. Yeah, gotta be. That's fine. Put in a noise gets so ear one eating. Alright, so learning to love Final Fantasy XIV video.
Sponsored by Squarespace. Stay tuned to save 10% or more on your purchase and learn more about building your website.
The pianist actually just
My son, the day you were born, the very forests of Lordaeron whispered the name Arthas.
that's not too.
When I was 11 years old, I took the plunge into the world of Warcraft. My friend and I went about installing Wrath of the Lich King using the CDs we got from the box, back when that was a thing people did on their PCs, and the rest was history. We played the hell out of it, all the way through Cataclysm. I have fond memories of exploring the world, hanging out with my friends.
Funny how he says about the box and the CDs. Because the only games I even remember like buying and playing on like a shitty PC or whatever was like what's someone I can't remember. Like what was it? Sims like 3 or something or 2. Um Black Ops I bought one time because I was a stupid 10-year-old. When did Black Ops come out? Like 2010? I think I was like 9. Um, yeah, it was like I bought it because I saw all those videos about clipping and modding, and I was like very dumb when I had like absolutely no clue how it even worked in the first place. So, so yeah, I just remember like having like those like PC games and then putting it, and compared to now, where it's just like, yeah, just buy it on Steam and there you go. It's so different how it is. How it
My
is.
guild. For a child with a lot of free time, it was an escapist fantasy. We didn't do hardcore raiding or anything. In fact, I don't know that I've ever done the endgame stuff in WoW. I was far more interested in exploring the beauty of Outland for the first time, arriving on the shores of Northrend, soaking in the vast expanse of Vashj'ir. Most of my fond memories playing WoW have something to do with its world and my place in it. Though I completed the main story quests in Mist of Pandaria and Legion, Nothing WoW did was able to attract my attention again in quite the same way. Nay, no MMO was able to do it. I tried Knights of the Old Republic, I tried Terra, I tried DC Universe Online, I tried Rift. None were able to rekindle that long-forgotten
DC Universe.
Thus did I conclude that I had simply outgrown MMOs. I had outgrown the need for these never-ending experiences. I had outgrown that continual denial of finality. I was ready to move on from the genre entirely, and so I did. For a time. One game I left out of that list of trials was Final Fantasy XIV. Its Heavensward expansion had just been released, and I thought the trailer was really cool. Specifically, I was really interested in what they showed of this cool castle that had floating islands surrounding it. So I tried it. I bounced off almost immediately. Like most other MMOs I had played, it had an incredibly slow start. Your choice of starting areas were pretty mundane, and I just couldn't get past how unbearably slow the story was moving. Part of the reason I loved WoW so much was that each race had their own starting area, and after finishing your quests there, you could essentially branch out in any direction. There were so many places to explore, so
I played WoW until like level 30, right? So basically nothing, right? There was one thing I always remembered was I was going to play with my brother. And I don't know what the race is called, but it's the purple elves essentially. Very long years or something. And he made a normal human, right? And I didn't know that depending on the race you pick, your starting location different, right? So I was like on one side of the fucking map, and he was on all the way on the other side of the map. I was like, "Fuck, dude, fuck!" I like actually like try to go through zone to zone to play together and shit. Did not know. I did not know.
To behold, 14 wasn't that. It had a strict story to follow that went next to nowhere for dozens of levels, and eventually I had enough. Clearly it wasn't worth slogging through this stuff to reach the cool-looking castle. It just wasn't. I had other stuff to do. So began my journey into Eorzea. My years-long journey, playing on and off, eventually slogging through to the end of A Realm Reborn, suffering through the patch quests before they were fixed, making my way through Heavensward. And I'll be honest, not even the critically acclaimed expansion which came...
That was in 5.3, right? 5.3 came out when? It was like... Was it like around October of last... Oh, it had to be early. I'm pretty sure... Pretty sure. Yeah, I played through all the slot quests. Or maybe not. It all depends when 5.3. I've been playing since like early of 2020. So it might have been.
After A Realm Reborn was keeping my interest in its entirety. It was good, much more enjoyable than A Realm Reborn, but I was always super underleveled for the main story quests, meaning I'd need to run several dungeons almost all the time just to keep my level up. I didn't really know too many people that were playing it, and so I was kind of just slogging through dungeons on my own, and there was nothing going on in the story that kept me pumped enough to go through that grind. So I just kept watching the amazing Shadowbringers trailer, telling myself that this was what I was in for if I just stuck with it. I had to see what was going on there. I needed to. Alas, somewhere around level 57 or so, I had to take a break. It was just too much. Recently,
on Shadow, watching it like 20.
I returned.
Essentially,
I thought, hey, maybe I should go back and finish. Recently, I returned. I thought, hey, maybe I should go back and finish Heavensward. I'm still interested in making it to Shadowbringers someday. So I finished Heavensward, and it was good, but it didn't really blow me away. I wasn't on the edge of my seat to see what happened next. That is, until a trial known as the Final Steps of Faith.
Yep. I knew he was going to say that. I knew he was going to say that because it was pretty much the same thing for me. It was pretty much the same thing for me. Like I was probably like a bit more into the story that like he's expressing, right? But really, like it's when Final Steps of the Fates happen, and it's just like it's bonkers, dude.
I won't show or go into detail about it until later, but suffice it to say, this moment completely changed my outlook on Final Fantasy XIV. It was the moment that recontextualized everything, the point at which I fell madly in love with it. It made me appreciate the journey of Heavensward so much more, and more importantly, I needed to see why Shadowbringers was apparently even better. And so that's what I did. I made it to the end of Shadowbringers, and now, I never thought I'd be saying this, but an MMO has finally not only won my attention, but rekindled the dying flame that World of Warcraft left behind.
So, funny he says, goes from Heavenward and just skips Stormblood. He just skips Stormblood entirely. He doesn't even say anything about it. R.I.P. Stormblood and George.
Become
the warrior of the darkness. So good. Oh yeah, Dark Knight. I'm leveling Dark Knight.
Have you ever wanted to create a website for anything? To make a readily accessible portfolio? To share your art with the world? To market your business? I'm here to tell you that as someone with literally zero experience creating websites, Squarespace has been a phenomenal tool. Which does mean, yes, I now have my own website. Click
Not
my
watching the
website
ad,
link
okay?
in the excuse not about what won me over in a general sense. I won't be talking about any specific story details, but there may be a few visual spoilers here and there showing certain areas and bosses from later expansions. You have my blessing to avoid watching the visuals and simply listen to the words if you want to avoid spoilers. Don't worry though, if you are looking for my more in-depth thoughts on certain moments, I have committed myself to making retrospective videos on every expansion in the future. One day, I'll do the deep dive. I think one of 14's strengths is a bit of a double-edged sword, and it's why I had such a difficult time getting into it. Unlike other MMOs, you are required to progress the story in order to reach new areas and content. As a WoW player who didn't read quest text, this was a pretty jarring transition, one that I did not immediately take to. Doesn't help that A Realm Reborn is perhaps one of the most bog-standard fantasy tales I've ever seen. I wouldn't call the entire thing terrible or anything, but there were certainly many moments that tried my patience in between the badass primal fights. Near the end, it starts to ramp up a bit in intensity. You get to hear more of the interesting voice acting, and it ends in a decent enough place. Or so you think. And then it sends you to another 100 quests. Again, I played before it was fixed. That are arguably even more frustrating than the ones which came before, seeing as we've now concluded a narrative arc and are sorta just floundering around in random dungeons waiting for the next expansion to start. There are brief glimmers of intrigue in the story, but nothing all that interesting really happens until the very end leading into Heavensward. Asking players to go through all of that sucks.
1 second. Yeah, I'm just done eating, so I'm just switching back to the other mic or setting. Anyways, just put this back.
And leading into Heavensward. Asking players to go through all of that sucks. I have always despised the "oh, it gets better later" argument, especially for games which are longer. Sure, if the first hour didn't grab me, I won't go too hard on it if the rest are banging. But if the first 30 hours are a slog, well, yeah, I don't know about that. Alas, this is the argument I have to keep making with Final Fantasy XIV, because it's just true. Everything
true.
after A Realm Reborn is really engaging and cool, especially Shadowbringers, and that's where the main story quest really shines. In forcing you to do a set of quests in order, the game is allowed to craft its story in basically whatever way it wants, outside of endgame rating. At least when I was playing WoW, there really was no requirement to keep up with the ongoing story. I was sorta interested in how we were going to stop Deathwing, but I never actually went and did the raids because I didn't want to go through the arduous process of gearing myself up, looking for a group that wouldn't flame me for being kinda bad, and wiping the raid a bunch. I had to just look up what happens on YouTube. In making its story a requirement, Final Fantasy XIV is taking a bit of a risk with its player base. In a genre that so prides the freedom of its players, the MMO, restricting your players' ability to interact with the game world like this is almost unheard of. But what it results in is a player base that will be invested in the story, provided they don't skip the cutscenes. They might not love everything about it, but they are following it. And if they're still playing the game at this point, it's likely because they care about it. Lord knows that's why I'm still playing. Once you get past that initial restriction, you realize why it's beneficial to build an MMO like this. Almost every activity has relevance to the story. Most quests, dungeons, raids, trials, your motivation to do them isn't to get to max level or something, it's to experience the content. The story associated with it, the new music, it has the advantages of a single-player RPG bunched together with the advantages of an MMORPG. Those dungeons, raids, and trials can be played with friends, and you can all play through the story at the same time. You get to experience it with a community inside the game. And it's why I can say there was a scene near the end of Shadowbringers that genuinely impacted me in a visceral kind of way. Because what that expansion did, much like Stormblood and Heavensward before it, was introduce a new set of areas.
God damn it, why do I have shit over here? Anyways, I think the scene is he's talking about, and it could be two, but I'm thinking about one at the top of my head. This is spoilers, by the way, but right, spoilers, okay? So, all right. So, it's very towards the end of 5.0. It's right before you get the last trial against Hades, Emmett, and and it is Graham who like essentially does another like what is it called, summoning, just like how similar to how he did with you, and he calls upon other 7 warriors, right? And those other 7 warriors are obviously the other 7 people you're going to queue up into a trial with. I think that's the part he's talking about. It's very fucking awesome, and it was so well done. I could be wrong though, but that's my guess because that shit's very cool.
Each with their own intimate stories attached, to thread players through a larger narrative that the expansion centers itself around. Each expansion feels like a new game. Often you'll be hanging out with characters you're familiar with, but then there'll be new characters to join your entourage, who each have their own struggles you'll be helping them resolve, leading to a climactic finale that not only leaves you fulfilled, but has you craving more adventures like it. You can reflect on the dungeons and trials not just because they had fun mechanics to learn, or had a sick new track to add to your Spotify collection, but also because of why you were doing that dungeon or trial in the first place. Often this applies to the final dungeons and trials of each expansion, which are always incredibly exciting, but it can even apply to other miscellaneous events in the story that have more to do with building out the world, or wrapping up a smaller story happening in the background. The point is that you're always learning more about the world and its characters, but it's a little more than just that. Unlike other Final Fantasy games, hell, unlike other MMOs, the importance your character has in Final Fantasy XIV is unparalleled. You are the Warrior of Light, Hydaelyn's chosen champion. Everyone expects that you're going to come in and save the day. Which is, again, why it's pretty jarring to go through portions of A Realm Reborn.
He said, like, unlike other Final Fantasy games. I don't really think he, like, means, like, for that comparison, because, I mean, other Final Fantasy games are single player, so obviously you play the main character, right? Um, but what he's saying is, yeah, it's still the same thing. He says like, with like other MMOs, like your character that you make is not just some tumbleweed in the fucking Nevada desert that just flums along just to move along whatever story or narrative that the game is like just trying to convey. Is like, no, it's like you are the main character, just like if it was like a single player game. You know what is this? Yeah, it's like it's very like unlike other
For the
games,
supposed
MMOs.
chosen one, you're more like a delivery man who occasionally slays some primals. It isn't until you take the fight to the Empire that you actually feel a glimmer of that potential in yourself, but even then, there's a lack of any real agency on the part of the player. They'll be seen awkwardly standing around in cutscenes with absolutely no input. They're a faceless, voiceless weapon the Scions point at their enemies. But that's the thing. Once you've beaten a Realm Reborn and slowly move into Heavensward, you build a bit of a reputation. You begin to affect the world on a much larger scale. You get embroiled in an endless, ageless battle between man and dragon. You become involved in various revolutionary movements against the Empire. You help a faraway land on the brink of ruin find the courage to rebuild. Slowly but surely, you earn your title. You fight for freedom. You help anyone and everyone in need and become a force of nature in Eorzea. And along that journey, the game allows you to take part in these events more personally. During cutscenes, you'll be given several dialogue options that help flesh out your character in whichever way you wish. They don't change the course of the story in any tangible way, but the fact that the characters around you are even asking for your input a lot of the time, and respond in kind depending on what you choose, makes you, the player, feel like the warrior of light. Slowly but surely, you become entangled with the story and world, and it's really hard not to get invested in a story so personal. When I look at the Scions now, I genuinely feel like it's my squad. Those are my friends. You don't fuck with them while I'm still standing. This connection to my player character only strengthens the attachment I feel to his appearance, his job, the way he carries himself. I mean, making my character look cool has always been something I'm interested in. I still have a really strong connection to my Night Elf Hunter and my Draenei Death Knight. I wanted them to wear some really cool armor. I wanted to take pride in my chosen class and weapon set, so that other players around me would appreciate that. I was interested in it so that I could differentiate myself from others. And I do still get that urge in Final Fantasy XIV, but now it's more than that. Now that I am ostensibly a character in this universe, I get to take ownership over what job that character has at any given point, how they look during cutscenes and major story events, right down to the set of clothes or earrings they decide to wear. When my character was going to war, I had them wear their cool-looking dragoon gear. While exploring new areas, I had them wear gear crafted by our lovely Tataru. In Stormblood, I really wanted to level a samurai to better immerse myself in the setting and conflict. I thought it an especially fitting way to combat the villain of that expansion. I had the same desire to level up a Dark Knight for the Shadowbringers expansion, though the grind was ultimately a little too much for me, and I ended up just defaulting to my Dragoon class right up to the end. The fact that I was even considering doing that in the first place is proof enough that your character really matters in this story. Now,
yeah, it's really the same reason why I even started leveling up Paladin, because it's really the same reason, and like exactly as he just said, like that whole thought process and such. Because Endwalker is coming, and obviously we know the job class, poster board, whatever, is Paladin. So it got me like, oh, I should double Paladin. I have it at 80, and I have it ready to go for Endwalker. I'm gonna play through it as a Paladin. I am a Dragoon main, but just for MSQ, I'm gonna go through it as Paladin, and then I'll quickly bring up my Dragoon as well. But yeah, it's literally as he says.
Since there's a lot wrapped into the MSQ, there have to be a good number of dungeons and trials to keep players engaged and to help pace out the story correctly. I think it goes without saying that A Realm Reborn struggles with this, so I won't bang you over the head with it. Instead, let me just say that the mechanical evolution from A Realm Reborn to Shadowbringers is a beautiful thing to behold, and something I believe is intentional. A Realm Reborn dungeons and trials primarily exist as cool little instanced events to do with other players. Almost none of them have mechanics to learn, it's just getting used to your role. Tanks pull and keep aggro, healers keep the party alive, and DPS kill everything. Every once in a while, you'll have to turn off some orbs in the four corners of the room, or you'll have to avoid a big AoE marker, but for the most part, it's just pulling and killing. Avoid the bad stuff on the ground. Slowly but surely, though, you're introduced to new mechanics. AoE bubbles that track your movement, stack markers where players have to bunch together to help disperse damage, area of effect waves indicating players to get as far away as possible, arrows on the ground indicating players will be pushed by the incoming attack. I'll admit that the game itself doesn't do a phenomenal job spelling out what all these things do, but that's where the frankly incredible community comes in. In WoW, it's almost just expected that you're gonna know what you're doing in a boss fight. If not, there's a pretty good chance someone's gonna get angry at you. It's just the experience I've had playing the game. In Final Fantasy XIV, every single time I've done a mechanic wrong and died, or was partly responsible for a party wipe, the party was really cool with it. They explained what went wrong, what to do instead, what certain mechanics meant, and I learned how to play the game from all these kind players who just want us all to have a good time. I don't know about you, but there's something kind of special about having your party explain how the game works to you in their own words, in their own way, forever personalizing your learning process. And they have every incentive to do this thanks to several subtle mechanics. Experienced players who are leveling other jobs are often placed by the game in parties with sprouts, players that are new to the game and have a green sprout icon next to their name. When starting a dungeon with someone who hasn't run the dungeon before, you'll get an on-screen indicator telling everyone that one or more people haven't been here before, letting everyone know, without singling anyone out, that experienced players will probably want to help explain to new players what to look out for and to be a little more patient with them.
It's interesting because when you're going through the game the first time, right? And as he says, it's like you go through the duties and whatnot. And it's like, oh, you guide to a mechanic, blah blah blah, and it's just like, hey, and it's like someone in a party or people, they're just like, it's fine, you do this and that, and bada bing, bada boom, right? And you pretty much have that experience. You play it all the way through mostly. Um, yeah, mostly. And it's like when now you're finished, right? Now you're at the end as well, and you're going back and you're doing, I don't know, leveling or whatever the fuck. It's like because you add that experience as well. It's like it kind of how should I say that? It makes you feel like doing that as well, right? It makes you feel like oh, like telling like what the sprout to do, right? It's like, hey, look out for this, do this when that happens, and it's just like it spreads. It's kind of like, I don't know, helpfulness, I guess, in people playing the game, and it's pretty cool.
Additionally, there are physical incentives to clear dungeons with players that haven't completed them before in the form of currency to exchange for better gear, and second chance points to use in your Wondrous Tales journal, a fantastic way to earn extra currency.
Mine expired. Fuck.
At literally every turn, the game facilitates a welcome environment and ensures that everyone is on the same page. So, as the game is introducing new mechanics in every single dungeon or trial that will invariably be explained by a more experienced player, you're building your toolset and becoming a more experienced player yourself. The game knows this and can feel more comfortable raising the base difficulty in future expansions. It doesn't have to worry about players being underprepared. They've been going through the main story and becoming stronger as they go, which is why the set of main story dungeons and trials and Shadowbringers are so damn satisfying. The game knows that you know its vocabulary by this point, and so they can throw pretty much anything at you and it won't feel out of place. And by God, is it satisfying. All of this swirls together into that single trial. The moment in time where everything came together and I realized there was something really special here. The final steps of faith. Again, I won't go into specifics, but if you know what's happened in the story up to this point, you know. But let me set the scene in a more general, vague sense. This trial is the culmination of the entire story of Heavensward, what I consider to be the true climax of its central conflict. Up to this point, Dragon Song
That's pretty fair.
by Nobuo Uematsu has been a powerful leitmotif threading each piece, each area, and each story moment together. But here you are, finally staring down your final obstacle, and Dragon Song plays in full. Your character, the Warrior of Light, an Azure Dragoon in my case, has fought tooth and claw in this conflict. You're ready to end it. But it's a fight that, for various reasons, you don't want to have. This didn't need to happen. There's a pain to this encounter that's captured quite beautifully. Then, you enter the trial. There are 3 phases to the fight, each of them using mechanics you've learned. Stack markers, player-targeted AoEs, knockback moves. It's one of the more difficult fights, and I remember wiping a lot the first time I did it. But we soldiered through. We talked out our strategy, we improved our movement, we learned the fight, and we persevered. The fight was over, and with it, Heavensward came to a close.
LB3
We get
tank
some great
for
moments
once.
with some, at this point, beloved
He's not gonna
characters,
do anything.
and get ready to welcome a new adventure. This is where I was hooked. I was enjoying the game before, but this is when I decided it was something special. And let me tell you, my love for it has only grown since.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy XIV is a game that took a long time for me to understand, and to be honest, there were moments where I genuinely thought I'd never have it in me to push through. That this would inevitably become one of those games I desperately wanted to get into, but couldn't. I'm glad that didn't happen. I'm glad that I can be here, caught up in the maelstrom of new people flocking to the game, getting ready for the release of Endwalker in November. I'm excited to be able to experience what it's like to play one of these expansions at launch, especially
me
one
too.
that will end the decade-long story arc. It harkens me to know that there's still so much for me to do. Jobs to find and play, side raids to experience, higher difficulties to build up the courage for, cool gear to find, relic weapons to obtain. I'm ready for this game to completely destroy my life, for I have become its prisoner. It took a while, a long while, but now I can finally say, I love Final Fantasy XIV.
Real good video. I think I kind of share a lot of the viewpoints. He says in his video, like, yeah, very, very similar. Yeah, good video. Learning to love Final Fantasy XIV by King K.